With us tonight, a longtime friend and a phenomenal. Oh, we have a podium coming. It's for Andre. Andre Fladell, the Prince.
Yay! A man who needs no introduction.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, buddy. If you can't hear me, I apologize. I'll do the best I can.
On.
Tonight,
Quiet so we can hear.
Emily asked me if I would come and speak, and I asked her, what would you like me to speak about? And she asked me to speak on the topic of breastfeeding, the advantages and disadvantages. No problem. Just want to make sure someone's awake and listening.
Tonight, guinea pig? Totally kidding.
In 1941, in World War II, we were bombed in Pearl Harbor. They wiped out our Navy, they wiped out our military. We were not prepared, we were taken by surprise. From a disaster within 4 years, we not only conquered fascism, conquered Nazis, and conquered Imperial Japan, we freed 14 countries in 11 different languages and started rebuilding half the world in 4 years. Today, in this country, in 4 years, we can't widen one lane on I-95 from Lake Worth to West Palm Beach. In 1871, Chicago burnt to the ground. In 4 years, they rebuilt the city, the infrastructure, the power grids, the public buildings, all the residential and all the commercial, to the point you didn't even know there was a fire. In 4 years, they rebuilt an entire city. Today, in 4 years, you can't get a permit for a shopping center in Palm Beach County. So the real question is what's going on with the government in this country in general, and why have we gotten to the point that nothing's moving anywhere? Some of you may believe things are moving. I'm telling you that the buck doesn't stop anywhere. The democratic concept by Harry Truman, that we make hard decisions and the buck stops here, has been replaced by who we should blame for what didn't work. I attribute this to every elected official in most places. Not all, but most. They're so busy with, I didn't do it, it was the other guy, it was the other administration, the other party, it was the other house. Instead of accepting responsibility for hard decisions, no one's making them. Remember once when a guy would get on camera and go, the gentleman from New Jersey, I may disagree, or the good senator from Vermont, or the honorable man from Wisconsin? Now they say that jerk doesn't know what he's doing. They say that moron didn't get it. Where's the respect that the government must give itself before the population of this country starts to respect the government again? And the answer is it's non-existent currently. Now the Republicans say that the Democrats, we're all baby killers. That's what they say, you're a bunch of baby killers. Not only you're baby killers, but the Republicans say you guys kick God out of America. The Republicans say you kick religion out of the country. The Republicans say you're against corporate America. Do you like it? So what do you do in return? You say they hate women and they legislate against them. You say that they are against all working families. You say they're against gays. You say they're against immigration. So we paint them and they paint us, and then you wonder why the whole government doesn't work? Because there's no respect. There's no respect from either side, irrespective of conversation. Every Democrat isn't a baby killer and every Republican doesn't hate women. And the sooner we start realizing that there are individuals on both sides that have dignity, the sooner the country's going to go back to doing what it should do. There are 3 issues I want to talk about tonight. Of these 3 issues, 2 of them are on track to destroying the United States of America. And I don't mean disrupting it, I mean taking it down. These issues are 1, the economic policy of this country or lack thereof, 2, the foreign policy in this country or the lack thereof, and 3, the one that won't take the country down, the one we ignore, called climate change. What I'm not going to discuss, well, I didn't do it, it's changing by itself. What I didn't discuss, and I'm not going to discuss, is the fact that we have a 19th century educational system that teaches logarithms and Chaucer's Canterbury Tales to a generation that has little use to either. What I'm not going to discuss is that we think Florida should compete against Wisconsin for intellectual properties. The intelligence we're competing against are in China and India and Brazil. Our whole education system is focusing against states, not countries, but we're not going to discuss that. Our lack of immigration policy, we're not going to discuss that. In 25 years, we still don't know who belongs here, who doesn't. why they should be here, who shouldn't. We're having a debate should have been settled a quarter century ago. In terms of addiction, our children are becoming addicted, the adults are becoming addicted to medication, drugs, alcohol, not to mention sugar and bad food. We have a country that's continually now becoming an addicted nation, and that's not important. Let me tell you what's going to take the country down. We have an economic policy in this country based on money that does not exist. You know when money stopped existing? 1971. In 1971, Richard Nixon decided that there needed to be nothing behind the dollar. He decided that we could print money with nothing behind it, and that's what he did in 1971 during Vietnam War. We've taken this a step further in the last 5 years. We're not only printing money with nothing behind it, we're creating money without printing it. We're creating money by wiring. So instead of making money that's worthless and giving it to somebody, we just invent it through a wire where the money doesn't even exist as currency. The country is $18 trillion in debt. You think that's an issue? It is. You know who gets it? China gets it. India gets it. The world gets our debt, and they understand our crisis, and they love it. We have social programs that are not sustainable. Why are they not sustainable? Because in 1932, when Social Security was started by another good Democrat, Roosevelt, the life expectancy was 67. They expected you retired at 65, and they kept you for 2 or 3 years. They'd give you some cash. There were 49 workers for every one person who was retired. There were 35 years of workers for 2 years of life. Well, guess what? The ratio is not 49 to 1. It's coming down to 4 to 1. And people aren't dying at 67. They're dying at 85 and 87. And given the way the numbers are going, it simply doesn't work. Who stands up and makes the correction? Who stands up and says what they really need to? Nobody. Nobody's dealing with the debt. So how does the government go ahead? What does it do? The government proceeds with something called quantitative easing. Does anyone have a clue what quantitative easing is?
No.
Quantitative easing is how the United States of America pays for its debt. We auction U.S. treasuries. We put them out to auction and the whole world buys them. They're called treasury auctions. Quantitative easing is a policy the United States does where we go into the auction and buy back our own debt with our own money. Let me tell you how nuts this is. We're afraid the world doesn't want to buy our treasuries anymore. And you can't have a failed bond auction, because if you have a failed bond auction, your money's worthless. So to make sure there's a demand, the Fed Reserve goes into the auction and buys our own money that we're selling to fund our own debt with money we don't have to begin with. Quantitative easing is the policy of the United States currency now. That's problem number one. Problem number two, climate change. Is there anyone here who thinks climate change doesn't happen? Good start. It's not about global warming. It's not about carbon emissions. It's not about industrial pollution. For the last 10,000 years, the oceans have been rising. Period. They've been rising since the Younger Dryas ice shelf went back north. And before that, 13,000 years ago, when the Laurentide ice shelf went north. The ocean has been rising for 10,000 years. For the last 1,000 years, it's been rising at 0.8 of an inch every 10 to 12 years. That's 0.8 of an inch a year. In the last 40 years, that's gone to 4 inches every 12 years. It's gone 4 times larger. And the question is why? Well, if all oceans rose at the same level, we'd say it's the ice cap. But they're not. The Atlantic Ocean is rising faster than any other ocean on this planet. So the question is why? And the answer is not really complicated. Number one, in case you haven't been paying attention, the Sahara Desert, as a desert, is blowing into the Atlantic Ocean. Remember, the Sahara Desert was a lake system. North Africa was all lakes. It became a desert. The desert is now changing back into a lake system. There's 3 inches of Sahara dirt underneath the Atlantic Ocean, giving it a 3-inch lift to start with. This has been going on for 10 years. The reason we've had no hurricane formation in the last 3 years is the Sahara Desert puts the hurricane out as it's forming off the coast of Africa. That's why you're not getting hurricanes here. The only hurricanes here are coming out of the Bahamas, which is another issue, or the Caribbean Basin. So the question is, you have the Greenland ice shelf. The Greenland ice shelf is on land. When ice melts over land, the ocean rises. When ice melts from the Arctic, it doesn't rise, it just changes form. So the Atlantic Ocean is rising. Let's forget why. Let's not even argue why it's rising. We know it's rising. According to any study, in the next 40 years, it's going to be up between 20 and 25 inches. By 2080, it'll be up 28 to 32 inches. Do you understand what that means? That means saltwater intrusion into the freshwater system is absolutely going to happen. The Biscayne Aquifer is screwed. The St. John's watershed is screwed. The estuaries coming out of the Gulf of Mexico are screwed because the freshwater system's going down while the Atlantic Ocean is rising. The next time we have a drought, the freshwater is not going to hold the salt out. The salt is going to come in. There will be no more freshwater in Dade County. This is not a maybe story. So the question is, what are we doing about it? Let me help you. Nothing. The barrier islands are made of immature gravel. There is no mature rock in Florida except for the limestone down the middle. The barrier islands are going to erode over the next 30 years. You know what the value of them is? Not the beaches. The beaches don't mean squat. The value of the barrier island is that the barrier islands are protecting the mainland from storm surge. When the barrier islands erode, the storm surge is going to come in 3 to 5 miles. Let me do that again. Could it happen here? Impossible. Why don't you look at South Carolina and see what's going on? That's right. South Carolina is now 5 foot deep in water. Do you understand why? Because the level of water on the oceans is rising, and the 1,000-year storm isn't a 1,000-year storm anymore. The 1,000-year storm is going to be a 10-year occurrence. May I? Good. We'll go to the next time. We doing good so far?
Yeah, let's go to debate.
You want to go to debate?
Yeah, do something about what we should look for.
Last thing we'll do is foreign policy. We'll lack thereof. And then we'll go on to the debate issue. And we'll deal with climate change afterwards. And by the way, just as a thought, for those of you who are involved with industrial pollution, the human species has been on the planet 122 million years. Since 65 million years ago, we propagated. It's been less than 100 years of 65 million that we've been polluting as a human, the Industrial Revolution. To give you a clue what that means, 65 million is to 100 years. If the entire history of the Earth was 7 days, a full week, we've been polluting for less than 1 second. If the Earth existed for 7 days, for 65 million years, our pollution is 1 second worth. The problem with climate change is we're not going to help it or hurt it. We may slow it. It's going to happen anyway. So the question is, what are we doing in Florida? Are we retaining water? Are we prepared for the saltwater intrusion? Are we no longer building on barrier islands? Are we passing legislation to understand Dade County's pumping water off the streets now? They've installed pumps. Delray goes underwater in high tide. In high tide in Delray now floods, just in high tide. Okay, last but not least, foreign policy. Since the bombing of the World Trade Center, we have the most screwed up foreign policy imaginable. We went into the Middle East having no idea what the Sunnis were and the Shias were. We had no idea the differences. We had no idea what we disturbed. We destabilized government after government with some mindset that we were going to form democracies. Let's talk about reality. 3 months after we went into Iraq, George Bush went on a boat and declared victory. Remember George Bush on the aircraft carrier? George Bush said there was a victory.
Mission accomplished.
Let me tell you what happened. The victory war he declared hadn't started yet. In the 19th century, when these guys were educated about war, you took property, you took land, you beat another army. You took control of the power grids, you took their resources, you declared victory. This is not a war like that. This is a cultural war. This is a 21st century cultural war. In a cultural war, the object is not to control land. The object is to kill the other person. Land doesn't matter. The government doesn't matter. The United States of America has only been in one cultural war before. Not World War II, Imperial Japan, Nazis, not World War I. The only cultural war we were ever in is when God said, under manifest destiny, that we have to kill all Indians because they're not white. The only cultural war was stated by Andrew Jackson, who said that under God's direction, the land between the Atlantic and Pacific belongs to the white man, and that the white man has to kill the Indian who is a heathen and who is a devil. The language of a cultural war is sickening. Not only is the language of a cultural war sickening, what we did was under God's direction. It wasn't about taking the property, it was about annihilating a race of people. This country's in a cultural war right now. It says that all infidels must die, all non-believers must perish. Do you understand? Are you ready to recognize this is not a war to control Washington or control oil? This is a war to kill non-believers. You know why? Because God said so. And if you don't come to terms with what the nature of the war is and what the objectives of your enemy is, then you're obviously not going to deal with it. So we're now in the Middle East. Look at our policy. We're helping the Sunnis knock off the Shias who started the whole thing with the Ayatollah in Iran. Now we cut another deal to help the Shias kill the Sunnis. So we got alliances with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, which are Sunnis against Shias, and we in the middle of this cut a deal with Iran against the Sunnis, and they're sitting there scratching their head, having no clue what we're up to. We're on one side killing off the Shias, and the other side killing off the Sunnis. We have alliances with our allies, the old Arab, and now we're allying with the opposite side. How does anybody in the Middle East have a clue what we're up to? You have Turkey bombing Kurds who are our allies. You got Russia bombing rebels who are our allies. What are we doing about any of this? Tell me anything. Tell me the plan of the United States of America to deal with ISIS and ISIL when we can't deal with Turkey, Russia, and or either the Shias or the Sunnis, and we're completely lost. While all this is going on, Russia's moving into Latvia and Riga with military force. We're not dealing with it. Russia's moving into the Ukraine. We've completely given that up for the moment. If none of that mattered, there's another war going on. China is in an economic war against the United States, an open economic war. We're ignoring it and not dealing with it because we can't, because we don't know how. China right now is building islands in the South China Sea and declaring it their territory. They're putting land in the middle of the ocean, building it, and then declaring it sovereign by the fact that it's within 30 miles around that land. Do you know why they're doing that? Because the trade routes that go across the Pacific Rim are between the islands and China, so they can control all the future trade routes. They're doing this because it's an economic war they have against us, and it's very much a thought-out war. They've moved all their gold to the mainland, so China took all its gold from Zurich and moved it home. They bought 15,000 metric tons of gold in the last 6 years, storing gold. They've changed their entire trade policies so that they're no longer going to be reliant on the United States. They're no longer buying our 30-year bonds and our 10-year bonds at auction. They're buying 3-year bonds, which means they want out. And they're buying land in Africa so they can start right now with a cheaper labor source in an agricultural production. Remember, there's only 2 growing fields in this world. We've got South America and North America, the only wheat plains that can grow food. The third is Africa, which has never been used. The one in Kiev is melted down. Remember the Grenoble meltdown? So there is no Russian wheat or Russian food production. China is purchasing tracts of land so they can replace us as an agricultural producer to the Pacific Rim. So you have China doing an agricultural war, you have China doing an economic war, you have Russia doing a position war, you have a deal with Iran that's actually upside down and backwards. And I'm not going to get into no inspections, I'm not going to get into no verification, I'm not going to get into, we released $150 billion without one statement that they wouldn't spend it on terrorism. It's an 8-year plan that should have been a 30-year plan. And that's why Ted Deutsch and Elsie Hastings recognized it. So the point I'm making is this. Our foreign policy or lack thereof is a nightmare. Our economic policies or lack thereof is a nightmare. And if you think not, just count until you can't count. How does this all affect the United States of America? Simple. In the year 22 to 2024, the Chinese government will demand that the United States dollar is no longer the reserve currency of the world. Let me do it again for you. In 2022 to 24, the Chinese government will not want the dollar to be the reserve currency of the world. The day they do that, within a week of that moment, this country's currency is going to go into a disastrous collapse. Let me make it real clear what we're talking about. They're going to want the euro or a mixed basket because they say the dollar isn't worth anything anymore. When they do that, every vault and every safe and every dictator and every drug dealer that has American dollars is going to be pouring on the market because they're not going to be worth anything. In the world today, if you buy oil or gold or whatever you buy, it's all done in dollars. So in any country you go to, their currency in the dollar is worth something because we're the reserve currency. If we're not the reserve currency, our dollar doesn't matter, given it has nothing behind it anyway. It's a fake scam. So if we don't straighten out the economic problems of this country, China in 2024, look at what they're writing in their own economic forums. They're saying they want to do it. And in 2024, it's scheduled. So this country has that period of time. How's this tie into the debate tonight?
Tie it in, tie it in. Make it
Tie it in, real quick. 3 minutes, then we'll open the question. When the debate's over, the Republican debate, the Democratic debate, whether you're for Bernie, whether you're for Hillary, I don't care if it's for Lincoln, it doesn't matter who you're for. Will you go home knowing what policy we have against Shias or Sunnis? Will you go home knowing what are we going to do in this multi-generational war to end Russia bombing our own allies? What do we do with Turkey bombing the Kurds? What are we doing with China in the South China Sea to stop them? What are we doing really with social programs? How are we going to end this non-sustainable technical number? Are you going to know about what we're going to do in Florida to make sure we have fresh water in 10 years? Tell me when it's over. I'm going to ask you the same questions. Ask each other questions. Not, I'm for America, I'm for working class families, I'm for corporate America, I'm for immigration, I'm against immigration. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody in the course of a debate would say, all social programs that are starting at 65 next year need to be 66? Wouldn't it be nice if someone said that every check going to every American for everything needs to be cut back 5%? It's a simple solution. Wouldn't it be nice if someone said the next time someone kills an American serviceman, wherever that shot comes from, we're wiping out that place? Wouldn't it be nice if someone stood up with policy, either economic, foreign, just give me something that lets me understand if you had the reign, if you had this button, what is it you're going to do to end this instead of passing it on to the next joker? So I have some serious questions with a lack of respect given to the people running and from them, a lack of respect being presented by each other, a lack of straight answers. And if you want to know why Donald Trump and Ben Carson are doing well, it's because the people should be marginal are becoming central. Do you know why the marginal people are becoming central? Because the country is throwing up from the crap that doesn't answer questions. So marginal people shouldn't be central. But how can you blame America for protesting and their support of the marginal characters is a simple protest of a lack of answers too. Immigration, education, addiction in the country, foreign policy, economic policy, and if any of you know a solution in the last 10 years, I'll open for questions.
What about Joe Biden?
I like Joe. I like him a lot. Any questions about any of it? Good, I'm good. I'm good. Yes, sir.
I miss everything. Can you start from the beginning?
Not a problem. What I said was this. I said the most dangerous thing in the world is sincere ignorance. The most dangerous thing in the world is sincere ignorance. And when you don't recognize you're not getting answers, you're contributing to allowing it to continue. That's number one. Number two, courage and passion are only remembered when it comes up against good tactic and obituaries. So you can have all the passion for America and all the courage you want. Without good tactic and planning, passion is only remembered in obituaries. Remember that quote.
All right.
Thank you.
Still the print. It's fantastic.
Dr. Andre,
You learn
I
more.
only came for you, buddy. I had no idea the show you would put on. Hello, ma'am. Terry, I haven't seen you since that No Good Obama campaign. Nice to see you, darling. Hang in there.
So